we're very fortunate to have two women from Queensland, and they're going to address our questions jointly because they work together. So I'd like to thank Alecia Maree Staines and Azure Rigney for being here. Alecia lives in Gubbi Gubbi country, Noosa, Queensland, with her 5 children and dog Bingo. She's been involved with maternity advocacy for 10 years, locally at state level and nationally. She's also a classroom teacher, childbirth educator, and creator of the podcast Birth, the Forgotten Feminist Issue, which is awesome, and you should go and have a listen. Azure Rigney is a 31-year-old mum of 3 living on Jagera and Turrbal country, Brisbane. She is Maternity Choices Australia Queensland President. Her car office can be seen in many Zoom meetings, and emails are sent while breastfeeding. She is focused on maternity system reform through utilising the Queensland Human Rights Act 2019 and states, we have 2 options: get the women out of the system altogether or improve the system, 1 letter, meeting and complaint at a time. So women, I'd like to ask you both now if you would address the details of the area in which you advocate for women's sex-based rights.
Most women in Australia give birth, yet as Janet alluded to through my podcast, Birth, the Forgotten Feminist Issue, it does seem really a forgotten issue when we look at the high birth trauma rates. I guess that was one of the things that really led me into this space. I had really positive birth, and I really couldn't understand when I was hearing other women's stories, like how much they were mistreated in the system. So over the years, between juggling children and classroom teaching and my own business, there's been a lot of things that I've tried to, retain women at the centre of policy and guidelines, and really bring forward the voice of women in this space. It's not always easy in a patriarchal system, but it's certainly something that is ongoing. And, more recently, what we've seen is the like a very forced attempt to actually erase women from this space through gender neutral language, which is really concerning.
Like Nick, I got into this because of my employer and like sexual discrimination stuff, which is still ongoing. So I don't want to talk about it too much, but then realizing it's bigger than just me. And it's like, how can you not share and advocate not just for you, but for other women? And yeah, that sense of collegiality, is that the word? Knowing that there's been the women before you and there will be the women after you doing this work. And yeah, I completely agree. Just in the last even year or 2 that I've been doing this, the pressure to change language in maternity policy, and especially the focus on domestic violence at the moment, and changing the language around that, and breastfeeding. It's just every facet, even paid parental leave, the way that they're trying to say, oh, you need to split that evenly, as if they're trying to erase not just the birth and postnatal experience that the woman has just gone through, but then breastfeeding and being primary carer. And I'm still in shock, to be totally honest.
Can you women speak to why Article 2 of the Declaration is so important to you, please?
I guess the 2 parts of it are that we've got men wanting to identify as women, eroding that side of things. But the biggest thing we've seen, which you had alluded to as well, was the erasure of women and mothers in this space to, be birthers and that kind of language, which seemed to really take almost like it just came from the US. And we absolutely see pushback, and like we've had some pretty vile emails when our organisation has refused to develop what they term to be inclusive or gender neutral terms. We've had some media around that as well. Our refusal to cave into calling women chest feeders and things like that. I think what we need to remember as well, that 70% of people have low health literacy. So when we're starting to remove proper terminology from this space, we've got a lot of like low socio, very vulnerable groups that actually aren't even going to identify with this new woke language. So absolutely, we need to be centering women and retaining this. Like motherhood, it's a very unique experience. Our capacity to gestate as females and give birth is a physical characteristic that actually distinguishes us from men. What we have, well, I personally have found sitting on a lot of high-level committees and policy development is without someone who is centering women in the room, that we would have already a lot of high-level documents that are actually gender neutral. It's not until, you know, it depends what consumer representative would be sitting in that space, you know, depends on the outcome of what that paperwork and policy direction actually looks like. We can't deal with the abuse against women in maternity services. So I'm talking like 1/3 birth trauma, high PTSD rates. The violence against women in maternity services is a reflection of violence against women in society. And when we remove women or become gender neutral, we actually can't deal with the reasons of why that violence is perpetuated against us within maternity services.
It's not even just about which consumer rep is on it, because we know that the loudest person in the room, usually the medical lobby, just gets their way anyway. And so, of course, the medical lobby is going to be all over this stuff because they're going to get the money for the hormone therapies and the bottom surgery and all this sort of stuff. So it's already stacked up against us. I see what's happened in maternity. It's just going to be even quicker. Like it's you know what I'm trying to say? Like it's just an extension of what we've already been seeing in removal of access to birth centres and home birth and continuity of midwifery carer, because the medical lobby don't want it. So it's like whatever the medical lobby want, they're going to get, regardless of which consumer is going to be in the room, in my opinion.
What final words would you have for us about future directions, campaigning, getting involved?
I would really encourage people to get political. I'm quite politically active. I sent a bunch of emails to some senators actually around maintaining women as being like the definition adult human female, and I raised huge concerns about issues in this space where I thought, you know, and I think most of us think that women, you know, and the birth experience of women is actively being erased. And I did have a reply from at least one senator, and I see that there was a question actually around, do we think that there's some steps in the right direction from the Liberal National Party? They were the ones who actually replied and said thanks for flagging it with us, like they'd known that the issue of trans women, i.e. men, playing women's sport was an issue, but they weren't so aware of what was happening in the maternity space. And I guess, again, birth's a forgotten feminist issue. So, you know, that we're all tired, we're all volunteers. So if you have the capacity, definitely get more political, try and, you know, engage with the media as well. We kind of use a multifaceted approach, whereas we have, you know, a grassroots movement, engage politically as well as use the media and try and, you know, this is one of those unfortunate things that when it's like a distraction, that while we have to bring things back to centre women, it then takes away from the advancement that we were trying to get for women anyway. Like it's actually really, it's taken a lot of time that we could be doing other things to advance women in this space.
Even though I think that it's stacked against consumer reps, still being a consumer rep on your local, state or Commonwealth committees, and even if you're not the rep, writing to them, just writing a letter, if you can, like every single week, saying, so what are we doing about this issue? Oh, I noticed you didn't actually answer my question in that response, and writing back to them. That's something that I'm starting to do more this year, is responding to the BS answers and airing it publicly if you're not happy with their response. So yeah, I totally agree. The multifaceted stuff. Yeah, writing complaints, that's my focus for the rest of the year.